Police in America name a suspect in the New York bombings. In the last hour, investigators say they're looking for this man, a US citizen originally from Afghanistan. America's East Coast remains on high alert after more bombs are found and another explodes. Also this lunchtime, Paul Gascoigne pleads guilty to a racist joke he made during a stage show. A playground for paedophiles, new online grooming warnings. And Big Brother is watching you. The Brownlees' dramatic rescue.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Charlene White.
Good afternoon. Within the past hour, the FBI has released the name and picture of a man they want to speak to over the bombings in New York over the weekend. He's been named as 28-year-old Ahmad Khan Rahami. Investigators are continuing to search for links between the two bombs planted on Saturday night. One exploded, injuring 29 people. The attacks came as the city prepares to host a gathering of world leaders to discuss the refugee crisis. We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but first, Neil Connery has the latest on the investigation.
A bomb squad robot near a New Jersey station examines a backpack containing 5 devices. Police sealed off the area after the backpack was discovered in a bin. As the robot cuts a wire on one of the devices, it triggers an explosion.
Police came out, examined the package, thought it could be a bomb, called the Union County Bomb Squad, at which time the Union County Bomb Squad sent in a drone. The drone has verified that this could be a suspicious package and a bomb.
In the past hour, police have released this image of a suspect they're looking for. They've named him as Ahmad Khan Rahami, who's 28 and a naturalized US citizen. The FBI has been searching a location in Elizabeth in New Jersey as part of their work this morning.
Hey, everybody get off of this street!
New York and New Jersey are on high alert after a weekend of attacks. The explosion in New York's Chelsea area injured 29 people. The bomb and a device found nearby were shrapnel-filled pressure cookers, similar to the bombs used in the attack on the 2013 Boston Marathon. As police investigations continue, 5 people are being questioned by the FBI after they were stopped in a car in Brooklyn. The attacks come as President Obama and other world leaders, including Theresa May, arrive in New York for their annual UN gathering. Security, which is always tight for these summits, has taken on an added urgency in the wake of these attacks. Neil Connery, ITV News.
NBC News reporter Chris Pallone is in New York, and in the last few minutes he sent us the latest on the investigation.
Good morning from New York. The NYPD and FBI are now looking for a person they want to question in connection with both the bombs that were left here in New York City on Saturday and a bomb that was discovered in Elizabeth, New Jersey, not far from here earlier this morning. Police say his name is Ahmad Rahami. He is 28 years old, and according to police, he is a naturalized U.S. citizen who was born in Afghanistan. Now, this has been a rapidly developing story ever since a bomb first went off on the Jersey Shore Saturday morning, then Saturday night here in the Chelsea neighborhood of New York. A bomb exploded here on 23rd Street, injuring 29 people. None of those people were killed. Another device was found nearby, unexploded. That is being investigated. But at this point, police believe they do have a person they want to talk to who they think is connected to at least this attack in New York City and also the one in Elizabeth, New Jersey overnight.
Chris Pallone in New York there. Prime Minister Theresa May is expected to criticise the West's response to the migration crisis when she addresses world leaders in New York later. Mrs May will call for a greater distinction between refugees and people trying to enter a country for economic reasons. We'll hear from our International Affairs editor Raghi Omar about that in just a moment. But first, let's go to Parliament Square in London, where campaigners have created a display using life jackets worn by refugees crossing the sea into Europe. They want the display to remind the leaders of the risks families make in order to take that journey. Well, Sally Lockwood is at that display for us in Westminster. Sally, what is it that campaigners are hoping to achieve here?
Well, we've all heard about the treacherous journey being made by refugees across the Mediterranean, Charlene, and this display is designed to remind the politicians opposite of the men, women and children that are continuing to die every week trying to reach safety in Europe, and put pressure on them to find safer alternatives. There are more than 2,500 life jackets here today, each used by refugees, and more than 600 of them were used by children. If you look closely, you can see just how shockingly poorly they are made. It's hard to see how they would have offered any level of protection at all. And earlier I met a Syrian refugee, Ahmed, from Aleppo, who told me about his journey crossing the Mediterranean in a tiny dinghy carrying 88 people, half of them women and children.
I had to put the life jacket for the child. When we figured out that the life jacket is fake, the smugglers sold us a fake life jacket. The dinghy was, droning before we took the boat. It was awful. It was so surreal. It was one of the worst experiences of my entire life. If you look back, it's death. If you look forward, it's death. Wherever you look, it's death. So you just do it. You don't think of the consequences.
Of course, seeing these life jackets up close does make you think about the consequences. What happened to these refugees and where are they now? One of the high-profile campaigners down here today was actress Juliet Stevenson, who wants to put pressure on the government to do more.
David Cameron's government passed an Immigration Act, as we know, and in it he pledged to take up to 3,000 unaccompanied children from Europe, refugee children. We have as yet not taken one. If people are moved by what they see today, what they could really do to help is lobby their MPs and lobby their local councillors. And I'd also say to Theresa May, this is a moment in history. It'll be very soon judged. I want to be part of a country that was there when the crisis happened and can proudly say we did our bit to help.
Of course, the refugee crisis will be top of the agenda at the UN summit in New York today. The hope is that visual reminders like this will make the world sit up and do more.
Sally, thanks very much. Well, as I mentioned earlier, our international affairs editor, Raghi Omar, is here with me in the studio. And Raghi, world leaders are aiming for a more humane approach to the refugee crisis. But what is Theresa May hoping to achieve? Well,
she's going with a very specific message as the Prime Minister to address the UN General Assembly, but more specifically a summit on humanitarian relief on the migration crisis and refugees. And obviously, with Britain being such a magnet, she feels, for a lot of refugees, she wants to make a distinction and says Britain's policy will be to make a distinction between refugees and those who are migrants posing as refugees. And she says that an unmanaged process discredits the entire basis of people claiming asylum genuinely. But also she wants people to claim asylum in the first country in which they come. So if you're fleeing Syria and you land in Greece or somewhere else, you claim asylum there rather than travelling all the way through, because that opens the whole process again to people smugglers and criminal activity. But she wants a managed, fair system that distinguishes between migrants posing as refugees and genuine refugees. And that's a very, very firm message she's going to take. OK, Raghi, thank you very much for that. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence has confirmed the UK participated in a coalition airstrike in Syria on Saturday. Dozens of Syrian government troops were killed by the US-led airstrike south of Deir ez-Zor. The MOD says it's fully cooperating with the investigation, adding that the UK wouldn't intentionally target Syrian military units. To other news now, and the former footballer Paul Gascoigne has been fined after he pleaded guilty in court to making a racist comment. The England star admitted to the racially aggravated abuse which happened during a show called An Evening with Gaza. Well, Ben Chapman is at Dudley Magistrates Court for us. Ben, what happened in court?
Well, through his lawyer, Paul Gascoigne denied he's a racist. He apologised. He said he never intended to offend anybody as he pleaded guilty to this racially aggravated public order offence. He arrived for court this morning signing autographs on the way in, and it was during that event called An Evening with Gaza in Wolverhampton last November that the court heard he humiliated a security guard, a black man called Errol Rowe, who was standing in a dark corner by the stage, by asking him in front of more than 1,000 fans in the audience, "Can you smile so I can see you?" Now, the judge told Gascoigne that he tried to get a laugh by targeting this man for the colour of his skin. And sentencing him this morning, he told him This is the creeping, low-level racism that society must challenge. I accept you grew up in a different time, but we live in the 21st century. Grow up with it or keep your mouth closed, Mr Gascoigne. Now, he was ordered to pay a total of £2,600, £1,000 in compensation to his victim, £1,000 as a fine, another £500 in costs, and it is really just another sad chapter in the very troubled life of this star in the years since he retired from football.
OK, Ben, thank you very much. Still to come this lunchtime. Brotherly love, the triathlon star helping his little brother over the finish line.
To be honest, I wish the flipping idiot had just paced it right and crossed the finish line first.
And making history at the Emmys.
Game of Thrones.
And a record-breaking night for the cast and crew in LA. The number of children being groomed online has risen sharply, with more young people looking for professional help following online attacks. The NSPCC is launching a campaign to crack down on it, warning that the internet is a playground for paedophiles. Counselling sessions for children worried about online sexual abuse has risen by 24% in the past year. Most of those concerns were raised by young people aged between 12 and 15. Their problems related to sexual harassment or extortion over the internet and pressure to view or send explicit material. Well, Emily Cherry is from the charity Childline and joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in. This isn't the first time that we've heard about these warnings. Are parents and children not listening?
So I think this is something that's so important for us to get the message out there, that this is something we can't tackle just at one person alone. This is something that we all need to take responsibility for. The calls that you mentioned and the increase through to calls to Childline in the last year are really concerning, and it's why today we've launched 2 films called Listen to Your Selfie, which aim to educate children about the signs of a healthy and an unhealthy relationship.
But it is also, I guess, the responsibility of parents as well to talk to their children about those sorts of signs. I mean, 14-year-old Breck Bednar is a very good example of that. He was murdered at just 14 as a result of online grooming, and his mum is very specific about this kind of thing, that parents must talk to their children about this. But what sort of signs could parents be looking for?
So it's so important parents have these conversations, and it's why the NSPCC will support parents to do that. We have a tool called NetAware that encourages parents to understand the risks online. The type of signs that parents need to look out for would be things like being excessively secret, which can be a teenage behaviour, but particularly if children are really worried if the internet's being withdrawn for them and they become really panic attacky about that. And then if they're carrying things like a mobile phone that a parent didn't buy for them, or they don't have their own money to buy it, it's those types of signs and symptoms. But really critical, parents need to have a conversation, and they can do that by helping to understand the risks children face online.
Now, I know these figures have gone up, but could we possibly be looking at it in a good way in terms of the fact that children are being more open and honest about what it is that they're going through as a result, you know, instead of just keeping it to themselves?
So the calls that we've got, so just shy of 4,000 calls that kind of came into the Childline helpline, predominantly from 12 to 15-year-olds. It's encouraging that more young people are coming through, but we shouldn't underestimate that this could be the tip of the iceberg. This is a really hard thing for children to talk about. So Childline is there 24/7, confidentially, non-judgmentally, for children if they are worried about anything.
In schools, do they talk about this in schools in terms of how to spot signs of online grooming?
We've had some really encouraging comments from the Education Secretary in the last week around sex and relationship education in schools, but we need to make this statutory. We need to ensure that all schools are having conversations with young people so that they can really understand what's a healthy and unhealthy relationship.
OK, Emily, thanks so much for coming in. Junior doctors have gone to the High Court this morning as part of their campaign against the government's decision to impose a new contract on them. The group Justice for Health says the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt is trying to force them into unsafe and unsustainable terms and conditions as he pushes through plans for a 7-day NHS. And the Countess of Wessex has admitted to being nervous this morning as she set off on a 450-mile bike ride. She's pedalling from the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh to Buckingham Palace. It's all in aid of the Duke of Edinburgh Award as the scheme celebrates its 60th anniversary. Next this lunchtime, how's this for a bit of brotherly love? Yorkshire's Johnny Brownlee was winning a triathlon in Mexico when the heat took its toll and he started weaving across the course. His brother Alistair soon caught him up but risked his place in the race to help Johnny over the line, as Martha Fairley reports.
He had been on track for a second triathlon world title, but just a few hundred metres from the finish line, Johnny Brownlee's body had had enough. Dazed and exhausted, he was close to collapse when his brother Alistair stepped in to help. And as the crowd cheered this act of sportsmanship and brotherly love, the pair ran side by side, Alistair almost carrying Johnny the final few steps before pushing him across the line into second place.
To be honest, I wish the flipping idiot had just paced it right and crossed the finish line first. So, yeah, I mean, very nice, but yeah, I mean, he'd won it easy. He could have jogged that last 2K and won the race. So, but yeah, who am I to talk?
From his hospital bed in Mexico, where he's now recovering, Johnny tweeted, "Not how I wanted to end the season, but gave it everything. Thanks, Alistair, your loyalty is incredible." But Alistair, who won his second Olympic gold just ahead of Johnny in Rio a month ago, says it was a natural human reaction and he would have done the same for anyone. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Continuing with the sports, but to Rio, where 12 days of record-breaking British achievements came to an end overnight, when the city gave a fitting farewell to the 1,100 athletes who shone at the Paralympic Games. Oh, it looks amazing, doesn't it? Brazil's Spirit of Carnival didn't disappoint with a festival-style dancing show before the sky lit up with a stunning fireworks display. And the ceremony also paused for a minute's silence to tribute to Barman Golbanazahad, the Iranian cyclist who died following Saturday's road race crash. Well, our correspondent Richard Pellet watched last night's farewell as he's watched all the action over the last 12 days. So, Richard, it's been a very successful Games for Paralympics, GB.
Well, they were after their best ever away Olympics, and I think in essence they got it. They're back up to second in the medal table, taking full advantage of Russia's ban. But it's all about funding, really, because £73 million was spent on this cycle of Paralympic Games, and that's up by almost half since that of London. So that funding is bringing results. And they've already launched a programme called Discover Your Gold, which is looking forward to Tokyo 2020. It's basically a multi-sport talent identification programme, already looking for the next stars. And when you look at some of the ones of this Games, well, it obviously works, because Kadina Cox, who was the flag bearer last night at that closing ceremony, she was only diagnosed with MS 2 years ago, and now we have her in a situation where she wins gold in both athletics and cycling and creates history. Other highlights for me here, probably Johnny Peacock, the fastest man still on blades, and don't underestimate how much of an achievement that is, because he's been beset by injury over the last couple of years. And then you've got the remarkable Dame Sarah Story, gold number 12, gold number 13, gold number 14, rewriting the history books again. She says that Tokyo 2020 is in her sights if she can work out a way of getting there, and she also reflected with me about how well the British squad have done in Rio.
Well, it's incredible to look back and think that we're already at the finish and we've hit that target, 147 medals. We smashed the 121 out the water. I think we hit that on day 8 even. So, no, it's an incredible performance. It's the strength and depth across all the sports. You know, it's not just a few sports winning gold medals. It's lots of sports. I think it was 11 different sports.
Well, the idea tonight was to fly the entire team, and especially the medalists, home on the same plane that took the Olympians home, the one with the gold nose. You'll remember it from the pictures. The problem that they've got is that there are so many medalists that they've had to split them across 2 separate planes, just so they all get the rewards, if you get my drift, that they deserve. There is going to be one almighty fight for the upgrades, I would think, on that plane.
Indeed. Richard, thanks very much. I look forward to seeing when you get back. OK, finally this lunchtime, it was a record-breaking night for the show Game of Thrones at the Emmys, with the series winning 12 awards. This means they currently have a running total of 38, one more than the previous record holder, Frasier. Do you remember that show? The fantasy series also walked away with a coveted prize for Outstanding Drama Series. Other big winners included The People vs O.J. Simpson. But as Sally Biddulph reports, it was a good night for the British hopes as well.
And the Emmy goes to Game of Thrones.
It was something they said a lot last night. Game of Thrones scooping award after award, including Outstanding Drama Series for the second year in a row. The show's co-creator paying tribute to the British members of his cast.
We have the best cast that's, I think, ever been assembled from Wales, from England, from Ireland, wherever Conleth is, from Scotland, wherever Rory is.
You're in the great game now, and the great game is terrifying.
The show won 12 Emmys, taking its haul to 38 and making it a record breaker. From medieval fantasy, awards also came for Edwardian etiquette.
Now you've struck a chord. Have I really? Oh, thank heaven.
Dame Maggie Smith was absent yet again when she won her third Emmy for the Downton Dowager, eliciting this reaction from host Jimmy Kimmel.
We're not mailing this to her. Maggie, if you want this, it will be in the Lost and Found.
Fellow Brit James Corden was on presenting duty, missing out on the Variety Talk Show prize to Birmingham lad John Oliver. But his carpool karaoke did not go unnoticed.
Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. Woo!
Attracting huge names, it won the award for a variety special.
Good morning, Miss Clark. I think.
The other big winner of the night was the O.J. Simpson mini-series, which took home 10 gongs, including the coveted Outstanding Limited Series. The 68th Emmys had all the glamour, all the hype you'd expect from the TV Oscars, and it was punctuated by British talent. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
A reminder of our main stories this lunchtime. The FBI has released information about a man they want to speak to over the bombings in New York over the weekend. And the former England footballer Paul Gascoigne has pleaded guilty to a charge relating to a racist joke he made at one of his shows. Well, that's it this lunchtime. Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin will be here with the ITV Evening News. The news where you are follows the national weather. But from everyone here on the Lunchtime team, enjoy your afternoon. Goodbye.